Folks, we are 22 subscribers away from the magic number of 45,000. Go ahead and smash that subscribe button. Let's get it done today. In this video, we're going over the latest Lions trade rumors, and this is a compilation of all the rumors that we had for probably the last 2 months before the trade deadline. So there's going to be players that you've heard about, but we're going to go through all of it. Is it likely? Is it unlikely? What would you have to give up in this scenario? Look, that's what we're talking about. We got the deadline coming up in a little over a week. We got to talk about it. Let's go. First player on my list that's been mentioned for the Detroit Lions as a potential trade candidate has been Brian Burns. Brian Burns, the really young, athletic edge rusher from the Carolina Panthers, who right now the Carolina Panthers is 0-6, and they're looking for a rebuild here. So maybe they'd like to get some draft picks because remember, they don't have a first-round draft pick. It is given to Chicago. What has he done so far this year? He's got 4 sacks, 9 quarterback hits, 13 solo tackles, and a combined of 20 tackles. So that's not that bad for a young player. And if you're trying to get more pressure with the defensive line, you add him to Aiden Hutchinson, and you got a nice bookends for the foreseeable future for Detroit. What would you have to give up? My indication would obviously you have to give up a first-round pick, potentially a third-round pick as well in Julian Okwara. You can't have an excess of edge rushers, and if you were to bring in Brian Burns, you got to kind of get rid of somebody, and so I threw him in the package over there. I think this is an unlikely trade. I would give this pretty much extremely unlikely, I guess. I just don't see the Detroit Lions giving up that type of draft pick for a player, and to me, it just seems unlikely that we would do such a move. I got a question for you. Should the Detroit Lions be buyers at the NFL trade deadline? Why for yes and for no? Let's get this conversation going. Next player on my list as a potential trade candidate has been Chase Young. We've heard him rumored as well to the Detroit Lions. Really good player, 24. Hell, he went right before the Okudah draft pick, and I know a lot of Lions fans were high on getting him. What has he done so far this year? He's got 3 sacks, 7 quarterback hits, 8 solo tackles, and a combined of 11. He was injured last year. He's been somewhat injury-prone, I guess, throughout his tenure as a Washington Commander, but much better this year. What would it take to get a Chase Young? Well, I think you're going to have to give up a second-round pick in Julian Okwara. That's what we've been hearing is they'd like to get a second-round pick, the Washington Commanders, but they may not even trade for him. They're still kind of in that playoff hunt. They got 2 games before the trade deadline. Look, if they lose the last 2 games, I think there's a possibility that they could trade Chase Young. But if they start winning, then it's probably not going to happen. But he would be a really good, young, talented player for this Detroit Lions football team, and I think that's appealing to Lions fans as well as the front office. So do I think it happens? I think it's less likely, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, the latest sponsor here at Chat Sports. PrizePicks.com/CLNS, code CLNS. They will match your deposit match up to $100. And if you want to spice up your NFL Sunday, look no further than Prize Picks. Right now, Prize Picks is a skill-based, real money, daily fantasy sports game. And if you're looking for more fun on game day, look no further than Prize Picks. How does it work, you ask? Well, here's how it works. You pick up to 2 to 6 players, and if they go more or less than the Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times more your money on any given entry. On Prize Picks, you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projection available, instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, who study this stuff 24/7. With Prize Picks, it takes less than 60 seconds to make your picks, so get started right now. And my 3 picks here, I got Kenny Pickett getting more than 219.5. Matthew Stafford getting more than 265.5, and Joshua Dobbs getting more than 218.5. So get started right away, right now with Prize Picks. PrizePicks.com/CLNS, code CLNS, for a deposit match up to $100. Why is it CLNS? Because that's our ad agency here. Use our code CLNS. It's real easy. 4 letters to get a $100 match when you sign up. So download the app today, and the link will be in the description comment section of this video. It's prizepicks.com/CLNS, code CLNS. Next player on my list that has been connected to the Detroit Lions is Derek Barnett, the edge rusher from the Philadelphia Eagles, 27 years old. And the reason that potentially that he could be on the trade is they're not using him quite a bit. They're just not. If you look at his stats, you're 0 sacks, 0 quarterback hits, 1 solo, 3 combined. And I'm gonna kind of think this. I really don't think the Lions should trade for him. I'd honestly just keep Julian Okwara over him, but if you're wanting to do it, it's probably a 4th or 5th round pick, maybe even later, 6th or 7th. It's potentially. It really kind of just depends. So this could be all up in the air. I just don't think that this is a possibility for the Detroit Lions. I think that we have better options on the football team currently right now. So again, I got a question for you. Should the Detroit Lions be buyers on the NFL trade deadline? Y for yes and N for no. Blow up the comment section with your answers. Here's a player now I think is legit on the trade deadline and the Lions have interest in. That's Danielle Hunter, the edge rusher from the Minnesota Vikings. He's 28 years old, but folks, this guy is absolutely been wreaking havoc in the NFL. And the reason he potentially could be on the trade market, where I think he really is because he's older. The Vikings are not doing well, and this is the last year of his deal, so it makes for a good trade candidate. What has he done this year? 8 sacks, 7 quarterback hits, 22 solo tackles, and a combined of 32. Really, really good. And if you watch him play, he's playing like it. It's not just some coincidental stats. This guy is doing fantastic work right now for the Minnesota Vikings. So what would it take to get Danielle Hunter? I think right here, potentially the Detroit Lions could do a 4th round pick or a 3rd round pick. Maybe it's a conditional. And Julian Okwara. I think that would be a good situation for both teams there. The Lions have traded with the Minnesota Vikings. Is not out of the realm of possibility. In all likelihood, I'm going to give this one, probably of all the players on this list, I think this would be the most likely, and I think it's possible. I do. You match him up with the Lions' defensive line, and you got some bookends there that's going to wreak havoc this year. I think it would be really, really awesome, and I'm going to give this one as possible. Next player that's been linked to the Detroit Lions is cornerback Patrick Surtain. Really, really talented cornerback. One of the best young corners in the NFL. Why potentially he's on the trade market? Because the Denver Broncos suck, and they're willing to right now trade pretty much anybody is what the reports are coming out. What has he done so far this year? 1 interception, 6 pass defense, 23 solo, and 25 combined. This guy is a very good player. What would it take to get him? It's going to take quite a bit. And I think it'd take probably 2 first-round picks, a 24 and a 25, because he's young on a rookie contract and he's good. He is a player that would make a difference now and the foreseeable future. Do I think this is to be likely? No, I don't. I think it costs way too much. Even though I would love to have him on the team, I think it would cost too much for the Detroit Lions to get him, and I'm not willing to give up 2 first-round picks, the future of this team, for him. Another player that's been mentioned in a trade here is Courtland Sutton, the wide receiver from the Denver Broncos. Why? Because we've had issues so far this year, I guess, for one wide receiver, if you want to take it over the top. Personally, I like what we got, but, that's what we've been hearing about, right, is the wide receiver issue. What has he done so far this year? He's got 25 receptions, 275 yards, 4 touchdowns, along of 25. Been solid for the Broncos' bad team. What would it take to potentially get him? I'm thinking it's a 3rd-round pick to get Courtland Sutton. Now, everybody knows right now they're sellers, and that does hurt the chances of the Denver Broncos potentially of getting a player of his caliber. Folks, I do got a question for you. Name a player you would like to trade. Any player. It could be a starter. It could be a backup. Throw the names in the comment section. Let's go ahead and continue here. How about Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver from the Denver Broncos? There's been links there. He's a younger wide receiver, 24 years old. And he does have some talent, right? He's not like he's some sort of a bum, because if you look what he's done so far, it's 20 receptions, 222, 0 touchdowns along of 46. He's having some issues, potentially, right? I think it costs a little bit more to get him. I think in a second-round pick because he is younger, and I think he'd do better for the Detroit Lions. Do I think the Lions trade for him? No, I don't. I don't really think there's wide receiver issues. I don't. I'm fine with what we got unless an injury occurred before the trade deadline. So I'm not really thinking too much of the wide receiver market. How about a new player that came on this list, and that's Derrick Henry, who they definitely look to be trading him. I heard he's on the trade block. I think you've all heard that as well. And this came for the Detroit Lions from the Detroit Lions podcast. They're Chris, Riz, and Sandman. And I got to say, he would look really good in the Honolulu blue and silver. And why would the Lions make a move like this? Because we're injured, right? We've had David Montgomery injury, Zonovan Knight to IR, Craig Reynolds got a hamstring, Jahmyr Gibbs. So there has been some injury issues. What would it take? Well, Detroit Lions podcast thinks it would take a 4th-round pick. And, oh, my God, I think that would be amazing. You put Derrick Henry on this football team, and you have a nutcase of a run game, and he's still very good. I mean, he's got 98 rushing attempts for 425 yards, 3 touchdowns, an average of 4.3. Imagine him on the Lions' offensive line. Ridiculous, right? He would get even more than that. You can pound anyone with the run game here. I think I'll say less likely. I'll just go there. But look, if he's for a 4th-round pick, you got to make a phone call, right? In the concerns here is, well, yes, we got some injuries, but players can come back, and that's 100%. That's 100%. But I'll say less likely, but not out of the realm of possibility. Another player that's been connected to the Detroit Lions is running back Najee Harris from the Pittsburgh Steelers. 25 years old. What would it take to get him? I'm thinking a 2nd-round pick that would take to get Najee Harris. I think this is extremely unlikely, because giving up such a high draft pick when you already just drafted a player in Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't make any sense. The 2nd-round pick's pretty high. I wouldn't do it there. But what has he done so far this year? 63 rushing attempts for 247 yards, 3.9 average, 0 touchdowns. I'm saying this has not happened. This is unlikely, actually extremely unlikely. Another player that's potentially on the trade block that the Lions would mention is, and this comes from heavyweights over there from Woodward, Saquon Barkley, potentially being a player that the Lions could look to get. What would it take to get Barkley? It's going to take, to me, a 2nd-round pick. He's still productive, but he's injury prone, and he's on a bad football team. What has he done this year? 53 rushing attempts at 207 yards, 1 touchdown, 3.9 average. Why do I think this is extremely unlikely? Just like we talked about Najee Harris, you have to give up a higher draft pick in the 2nd round. Will you just get Jahmyr Gibbs? It doesn't really make a lot of sense, if you ask me. It truly doesn't. I think that the Lions have better options. If they're wanting to make a trade, you could do a backup cornerback, or you can do an edge rusher, in my opinion, or a later round pick for like a Derrick Henry. But that's the trade rumors, links to the Detroit Lions were heard over a couple months. There's been also Mike Evans. I didn't put him on this list because the Buccaneers are doing good. They're not going to sell when their team's doing really good. But again, name players you want the Detroit Lions to trade for in the comment section. Let's have some fun with this one. With that said, folks, adios.